welcome to another episode of Reptile Fight Club. Guests are back, people. We've got a couple good guests today. I'm excited to have these guys on. Dave Levinson, welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
Doing well, man. I appreciate the invite. We want to do this for a while.
Yeah. It was this was kind of prompted by Dave sending a message asking if I'd seen this topic on Facebook or something. So it was a good topic and worthy of a fight. So we got Dave on, and also with Dave is Filipek. How you doing, Will?
Pretty good. Glad to be on. It's been a while. I've been bugging you for a while about these, Justin, but I just either been busy or just forgot about it. Just life, I guess.
Yeah, we had kind of a mix up or lull in the podcast a bit with the change up in host.
You start hitting a lot of the topics I told you about anyway, so it's kind of like you've hit them, so it's all right. It's
I've wanted to have you on for a while, so glad we could get you on. So this will be great. Well, what's new? What's going on with you guys? You want to introduce yourselves? Maybe tell us a little bit about yourself, a little background.
Why don't you go ahead and start, Will?
Well, I'm Will. I run a company called TJW Exotics, and I work with a lot of different things and pairing stuff up, working on a building that I'm currently in right now. So, yeah, real busy. Yeah.
Really impressive building too. You sent a couple pictures the other day. It was pretty sweet looking.
I appreciate
quite the facility.
It.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
So have you kind of built that kind of the ground up and
Yep. It was, I tell you what, I posted a picture, cause I'm not on social media hardly now because of this, the whole building is taken up, cause we had the shell and the skeleton of it put up, but we pretty much did most of the inside. So been busy for probably most of this year, Yeah. So, and it really screwed me rodent wise too. Oh my God, horrible. We had to cut our collection in half, put them in a smaller shed that isn't insulated, didn't have any way to cool them down. This summer got super hot, killed another half of the rodent collection. So we had stuck with almost no rodents. And I live close to Dave, and Dave couldn't save me either. I'm disappointed in you, Dave.
Kind of close. I had to save myself, buddy.
Rodents can be kind of make or break in some instances, man. It's hard.
Just finding people with them. My God, It was like, it almost made me go like, why do I do ball pythons? They're the only thing that eats life.
Yeah. I've been breeding mine for, 20 plus years. So yeah, it's it's hard when you have to go out and source them. So I just kind of said I'm going to do it. But yeah, things get rough when it gets cold or too hot or too cold. And you
right. Oh, it was brutal. Pain. Like Dave, this is going to sound bad, but I can't bring myself to do what Dave does. Dave drove down to Texas to get 3,000 mice or something, Dave. This was a while ago, I think.
Yeah, it was a shortage locally. We produced a lot of babies that year, and I couldn't find enough anywhere around me, and I could only do so much with frozen thawed. So yeah, we did the round trip down to Texas. It was our only option, our cheapest option, to be honest with you, when I started calling around. But I want to say it was probably around 2020, 2021, right around that time.
Rodents been short ever since then.
Rodents have been short for 20 years.
I don't know. It seemed like they were easier to get 10 years ago for me. My collection's gotten bigger, but it's really just the ball pythons that are eating live rodents. Everything else, I get frozen thawed, and it's not too big of a deal.
Yeah, I get that. I prefer my frozen thawed species.
Yep. Yeah, especially in times like this.
Okay. And I neglected to mention that we've also got our faithful co-host here, Bobby Rock, Rob Stone. How you doing, man?
Oh, hi.
Perfect. All right. Well, this lovely echo is a wonderful thing. Yeah. Are you? Oh, okay. Yeah, now it's gone. Thank you. That's perfect. Okay, so well, I don't know how are your breeding seasons going? You guys in the thick of things? You pairing stuff up or long past pairing up?
Yeah, just been pairing stuff up, not getting a whole lot. I mean, a little bit of breeding here and there, but we'll see. I after last year breeding wise was just so bad that I got hit with like the trifecta. Like we had a really warm winter, maybe just a handful of days that got cool enough to cool my room down. And then with the ball pythons, they had such a rodent shortage that I just couldn't feed them that much. So, like the old saying, if you don't feed them, they don't breed. So,
yeah.
And they didn't get fed as often as I usually would. And I'm kind of more like you guys though too with the feeding. I feed my ball pythons very seasonally, so I try. So I don't usually run into that, issue with feeding wise with them.
Yeah.
So
yeah, they can be a headache. Those ball pythons.
You treat them like anything else. Like I don't feed them for months at a time. I tell you what, maybe every once in a while you get a few that are still like, nah, I'm dumb enough to keep going. But other than that, most of them usually go. It's like, oh shit, I may not get to eat. I better take a chance while I got it, because I think everyone else's ball pythons get so used to, constant week or 2 week feedings that, they can afford to go fast for a while.
Yeah.
Well, if you make them fast before that, well, then they don't know. Then it's more like what they would see in the wild.
Yeah.
So.
I think Ryan Young called that purposeful neglect. That was, like
I've heard Warren Booth say too, that calculated neglect.
Yeah,
I mean, it sounds bad, but it's true.
No, I mean, that's what they experience in the wild. Why would you, why would you not go with a more naturalistic regimen?
Right.
But, cool. Well, what are you guys excited for as far as production this year? Any projects got you foaming at the mouth?
Well, hopefully I have better luck with pygmy pythons. I have one more female that she's the one that's still yet to breed. I've told you about my other two. I was having issues with their, not them breeding, but fertility wise with them. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying this other girl, and we'll see how this goes. Mr. Julander saved the day with, hitting you up, because I mean there's literally only maybe like 2 people I could think of hitting up for pygmy pythons, and you were obviously on top of the list.
They're a challenging species in a lot of regards, but I don't think they're that extremely challenging. I mean, I hear a lot of disparaging remarks from our good friend Owen, but I don't think they warrant those. They're paying to get starting on food, but no worse than a black-headed python or other picky.
It's like
lizard.
I've heard. It might even have been you that mentioned this, but I mean, it's like, well, you were just not. It's not that they're horrible to animals. It's just we just don't feed them the things they should be getting fed. And honestly, I've been talking to a lot of people. I've been like, man, we get these big companies for rodents and stuff. I'm wondering maybe eventually someone might decide to do feeder lizards or something. Mm-hmm. I mean, shit, ball pythons are bred to such an extent. I mean, why don't we just do feeder ball pythons? And this might lead into our conversation later, by the way. I'm going to bring something along this up later on. But I don't know. That's just what it's been in my head for a while, fixing. Because something I've been meaning to ask you, Justin, about anthracia. You ever notice with constipation problems with some stuff, maybe, where like just the back end, you could tell they have to poop, but they seem to have trouble pooping?
I've seen it in a few like neonates, like young animals, but typically they're pretty
neonates. Neonates, not adults. Adults are just rock solid. And
once in a while you can see the urate pellet, the white pellet kind of stuck there, and usually I just kind of help them work it out, but I think that's probably because of, feeding them rodents instead of lizards.
Right. I'm wondering, I was kind of wondering too, Rob knows, I was preaching about this, like the Python part or Python one I was on is, we're feeding them pinkies, and chances are we're just grabbing pinkies out of the bin, or we get them from a rodent source that probably picks them out of the bin. So chances are these animals still have a gut full of milk. And I can't imagine that going through the python system with a python that already doesn't eat mammals, well, neonate or baby mammals to begin with, that, you know, when it does end up eating them, that causes issues as far as constipation and bloating or diarrhea and some, you know, like I hear a lot with like the green pythons and stuff, you know, having prolapses and stuff, you know. To me, it just sounds like I think it's just rodent issues, but we won't know unless someone starts feeding like geckos or skinks to their tinier species.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. I know Casey Lazick was telling me when he first bred the pygmies, and he said like he tried, and then he threw in a house gecko or something. The thing just nailed it, you know, just right off the bat. And he fed it geckos for a bit until it got to a certain size, and then it took rodents no problem. I mean, adult Antaresia eat rodents in the wild. We found a DOR children's python up in Darwin area, and it had a bolus, and so we squoze it out, and it was a big rodent of some sort, you know, some sort of rat or something. But
so with the diet I was talking to Nick a while ago, and Nick was saying the pygmy banded pythons are typically lizard eaters even to adult size. Is that true?
I would think they'd be the same, like rodents.
It's whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. I think they probably start on.
I was just curious. I remember him saying something about it.
Yeah. They do come from a little bit more of a, you know, harsh environment, I guess you could say. So maybe there's less rodents available in their natural area. So maybe I'm sure adults will take a lizard if they're given the opportunity.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. That's, those are cool. I got to see those out in Australia a few years back. The pygmy.
You lucky man. Those are those are cool. Those are. I'd have to say those really, as far as the different looks I've seen of them. Well, not different. I love contrast animals like that. So like the pygmy bandits with that bold pattern that's most of them seem to have is just, I mean, it's really cool. That's why Stimson Eye is by far my favorite as far as the Antaresia. They're just, you know, I think that's why I thought it was appalling when they think that children's pythons are the same as Stimson's. And I'm just like,
ridiculous. I agree.
I like how they those two species are identical, but like all the Curtis complex is all like 1.5% divergent from each other, but they deserve 4 different species, you know, or something like that. And I don't mean to rant about this. I'm sorry.
No. You get me talking about Australian pythons. We could go all night, I'm sure. But
yeah. Well, Dave likes Australian stuff too. So I think we could have a good little threesome going on.
There you go. We'll have to save it for another day.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, Dave, you got any really exciting projects this year?
We're waking all the blue tongue skinks up in a couple of weeks. I'm always excited about that. Every year try to do something a little bit different, see if something weird pops out that makes me want to pursue another project. Got all our other little pythons downstairs. Like our womb has been breeding really well for the last month and a half. I think we have one very close to an ovulation. Everyone else is like building. Ball pythons are kind of hit or miss. I've got gravid females out there. I've got females with no follicles. I have females that are developing. It's kind of all over. And the bows aren't looking too bad. I think we're pretty close on our first ovulation of the year. I just had a litter 2 weeks ago for an off-season litter with a female. So, you know, there's kind of always stuff going on. And then corn snakes, I get all the colubrid stuff woken up in a couple weeks also. They usually come up the same time as the skinks. So in about a month, it's going to be hell here because every day is going to be what's not breeding, what needs to be breeding. And you know what it's like breeding skinks. And when you got a lot of them, it is a lot of time of your day just getting rolling.
Yeah. Now, do you have a big facility with like different rooms for different species types or groups or whatever?
So what we have is, in the house, we have certain rooms that we keep certain things. We have a lower level to the house. So we kind of have that broken up for a few different things, whether it's grow out animals for boa constrictors. We got a room, we have a lot of our Australian stuff. I got the other room where I honestly keep my colubrids and my blue tongues in, and I cool them all together. And then in the main warehouse, one half of the building is all boa constrictors. The back half of the building's all ball pythons. Now, of course, air can sneak from side to side. There's nothing really stopping it. But for the most part, everything kind of has its own little space. I, in the past, when I've had no space, have had multiple species in one room, and we're still successful to an extent. But I know when I first got in the hobby, I bought a little bit of everything, which was too much. Jammed it all in a little room and really wasn't successful with anything. But then when I really started making my focus on boa constrictors, just kind of figured it out that I was able to breed something, produce that first litter, and that was it. But yeah, a little bit all over the place. I'm breeding children's pythons for the first time this year. Just nothing crazy. And I got some striped spotteds downstairs I'm pairing right now, and they're building and they're getting into it pretty good. So, every couple of years I try to get something new that I haven't worked with just for fun, like rosy boas I've been slowly building up on for a couple of years. But yeah, I'm a little addicted to everything. So I try to have just a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's funner that way.
Too many cool things out there for sure. Yeah. We had a discussion. I think it'll be released here this coming week. Last week, Rob and I talked about different species that, should there be species that you just don't work with, like Draco or something, where they just don't do well in captivity, or can we find a way to make them work, or find a way? Because ball pythons used to be the same way. They were kind of the untouchable species. Nobody could get them to breed, and they were very difficult. And now they're the most commonly bred python in the world, so it's kind of one of those things, I guess. But,
yeah. No, I agree with that with most species. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was just going to see if you guys were ready to fight, but didn't mean to cut you off.
I'm ready.
Okay, well, let's do this thing. So we'll go ahead with the coin toss. I believe David is going to be calling the coin toss. So let me introduce the topic here. We're gonna be talking about the reptile industry. So there's kind of a bit of doom and gloom from different sources online saying, the reptile industry is dying and it's in its final stages of death, and we should all abandon hope and give up. But I think there's a good debate, to be made on either side. So we'll go ahead and have that fight. And I think we're going to do a little tag team here. So Dave and Will are both going to pick one of us to fight with on their side, and then they'll pick which side they want. So I guess whoever wins the coin toss can either pick the side or their partner in the fight, and then the other one gets to pick what side they defend, or vice versa. So, all right, well, go ahead and call it.
Heads.
It is heads. So, all right. Do you want to pick your side or pick your partner?
Damn, I didn't think I was going to win this. I'm going to go with the hobby's not dead.
Okay. All right. So, Will, who you want to team up with?
Oh, man. Rob probably I'll go with Rob. Rob has a pretty good insight on the industry because I think from working with Pro Exotics, so I think he might have a pretty good insight on a lot of this stuff. So
good job.
I choose Rob.
All right. Okay. And then as the winner of the coin toss, Dave gets to decide if he goes first, leads it out, or if he has Will go first. Will and Rob.
I'll let Will start.
Ooh,
okay.
Me start. Okay. Well, I think for me anyways, I don't know. Mine more picking certain parts of the industry that I think we were slacking in, or we should change or look at a little bit differently, unless Rob wants to go ahead and start with something, which I don't mind.
Well, I think, from my perspective, this is good. This is sort of the form of the thing, because it's, I guess, is going to push me in a way that isn't necessarily my natural predilection on this. So I think the way that I would start is sort of by defining the terms, right? So to the extent that when people are talking about this, what they're talking about is saying sort of the days of the pyramid scheme almost, or it could be, you know, negatively categorized as sort of the pyramid scheme atmosphere, and either get rich quick or sort of selling a dream. That I think maybe some of that is dead, right? In the sense that people are seeing through some of that and saying like, okay, what's the real benefit to me from just buying into something that you've already produced, right? Because invariably, as we've seen with all these projects, right, there's a natural tendency on new people to go to the people that actually made it famous in the first place, right? And the only way, at least over the course of the last 20, 25 years, that people that aren't the person that is known for that entity, right? The person either, if we go back far enough, right, with the Reptiles magazine ads and Terry Dunham, right, selling his Anarthristic Hondurans for $1,500, $1,000, whatever it was. If we're viewing it through that lens, if you got them from Terry, okay, that's the price, right? And sort of creates this idea in your mind that this is a real thing. But if instead I got it from Dave, it doesn't, even intrinsically upon receipt, it doesn't feel like quite the same thing, right? It doesn't come with that, the stamp of having come from Dave. And I know, heck, I mean, Will, you know, you've seen it with the Bloods and Short Tails, right? A problem that's happened sort of throughout time has been like, if it's a Barker approved project, then it has 5x value than if it's something that is equally, if not more cool, but isn't something that they're working with. That's been a thing for 20 years. That's not new, but maybe people are more aware of that now. Maybe the quote industry has expanded enough that we're getting people that are more open to that reality and just having more insight into that. And heck, I mean, shoot, if people are going to a reptile show and you go and you see, and even people who breed ball pythons are invariably walking by the tables of people who breed ball pythons because all of it is just replication. We're not at a point like 10 or 15 years ago where Amir could be at his table and everything he has is stuff out of wild caught stuff that is nothing like what everyone else has. Right? That's not where we're at right now.
Right. Yeah, the few
so I think
things
I've
I'd
thrown
like.
some stuff out there. Yeah.
Okay, I would say there's a couple
little feeders for you, Will.
Yeah, I was gonna say a few things I'd like to point out that you said too that I think on just I don't know like the you brought up the what was it the kind of betraying yourself in a certain way, and I've noticed. I wonder if that's getting to become more of a detriment. Is some of the top tier breeders in the industry showing off this flashy lifestyle, and then it just creates this false sense of I hate to say hope because I think some people look at it more realistic, but then you just got people when you're talking about animals who start getting this wild dream. Well, if I had this many animals, maybe I can do that, get this kind of lifestyle or something, because I've seen a lot of people, especially during COVID with the big boom and everything, the COVID breeders coming in and looking to, plunk down their 401k and all that into this, or, taking loans out on their house to try to get into this. And that's a dangerous game to play, man, especially if you had a snake and you want to go from a snake that you had 10, 15 years ago to, I think I want to have 50 or 100 snakes. I think one of the craziest things I remember ever hearing was, and it's probably still happens, but I remember a while ago, I was at a reptile expo and this guy I never saw at a local show before, I just started talking to, and he goes, yeah, I had my first season. And he said he had 25 clutches his first season. I go, holy shit. Some people might not, apparently boutique is still 200 or 300. That's crazy. but 25, I'm like, geez, your first year and you're 25 clutches. I get about 30 clutches and I'm like, no, can't do that. We're speaking to someone like Dave though, who has like 200 boa litters, 500 ball python clutches, and he's going to laugh at us for even mentioning this. But I think though, these are people too that just, they go from 0 to 60, like, I mean, really quick. And, Dave knows. I mean, ball python people are doing this really quick. There is no such thing as slow growing anything. And when it comes to ball pythons, that's something I've noticed too with the market is that it's shifted a lot more to where people don't even care to buy a neonate anymore. They'd rather buy a subadult or adult or nearly adult animal for, preferably the same as a baby's price range, but bigger animals. So there is no such thing as patience in this. And I think we're going through this cycle again that I'm sure all of us have seen where, first it was the new genes, and then every new gene, it was, top tier and everyone wanted to produce 1 million of them. Well, then that faded away. Then Kevin did the whole, combining stuff. And that's when, all right, now we combine these genes. Now it doesn't matter what it is. It's worth $10,000 and it's still brown and black, right? Or whatever it was. It didn't matter. And, it could be like a spot, like this, you guys may not know, but it's like a spot nose hingioma. So it's like two of the lethal genes you put together in the super form. So you get a super wonky snake, and, that would still be worth $10,000 then. And so then that steadily went away. And then it became how many genes we can add into a snake. And then eventually the recessive thing became a thing. Now it's multi-recessive things. And you start seeing these trends, and I can't help but wonder, like, are we getting to the end of it? I only see one other route we could do with ball pythons, and that's every route that every single reptile has taken, and that's selective breeding. Pick a route you like in a mutation and be like J&D, or not J&D, JD, with Axanthics, be known for one particular thing and be really good at that one particular thing, rather than trying to chase some multi-recessive clown project that, and that's something I remember hearing back in the day too, where a lot of people were talking about these 8 or 10 gene incomplete dominant combos being white with specks. But these 4 or 5 recessive combos are starting to look the same too. Like, people are telling themselves a sunset clown pied and it looks fantastic. I go, it looks like a Mojave pied, just no pattern and kind of dingy colors and stuff. And don't get me wrong, I like all 3 of those genes, but together they probably should never be put together in the first place. But I don't know. I might have went off topic for what Rob said.
No, you're good. So the one thing I want to toss out there, just because I do think it's so intrinsic and a problem, and probably something that we won't focus on, being mostly snake and lizard, but less, Dr. J notwithstanding, maybe. The leopard gecko market is the one that I see most violative of what you mentioned, where everyone goes from 0 to 60, right? Like, yep. It's almost like, oh, I have a pet leopard gecko. And then it's, oh, I want to start breeding them. Whenever I hear about that, invariably the answer is, oh, I'm small time. I only have 50 eggs. And it's like, that's a hell of a lot of geckos for someone that is going into a market where there's definitely the market to uptake those, but not necessarily at that price point, especially in the absence of the infrastructure to support it from that person. Right. And it's just, I see that so much, and it really makes me sad, to be honest. It's like, that is intrinsically a problem, that there's very little middle ground where it's like, legitimately, leopard geckos, talking about selective breeding, there is huge potential for that, and there are people that are doing it, but like, a newcomer would be far better situated to spend more money and get one excellent pair to take in their own direction, in their own mindset. And it would be much easier to cultivate interest in that one select thing that was maybe 6 or 8 babies over the course of a year. But invariably it's, oh, I have this handful of pairings or whatever that easily turns into 50 or 60 babies in a year. And it's not a surprise in light of that almost invariably the lifespan within the hobby as an industry person or whatever of a leopard gecko breeder is 1.5 years or 2 years.
Yep. Well, I think you guys came in hot. That was some good punches there. And I mean, I guess is I'll maybe throw in something real quick and then let Dave take over. But I think while we're defining things, and I agree, I think this thing is cyclical, and we see this rise and fall of different trends, different, and they all seem to circulate around making money rather than the passion for the animals. I mean, I believe they start with the passion for the animals. I mean, I look at people like Kevin or Brian Barczyk or whatever, They love the animals. There's no denying that. And they're very excited and passionate about them. And they're great, at promoting the things that they work with. But I think a lot, like you said, a lot of people get in for the wrong reasons. They see, I'm going to jump in this pyramid scheme and I'm going to make lots of money. And then when they realize that's not the case, or when people have less, superfluous money to spend on pets, then that kind of goes away. And I think it's kind of it actually strengthens the real hobby, which is the passion for the animals, wanting to share that with other people, wanting to show people how cool these animals are. And when those, car salesmen that got into this as an investment opportunity get kind of cleaned out from the lull in the market, then that's when we can strengthen and go back to kind of the roots of the thing. So I don't know. That's how I kind of respond to that. I don't know if you have something to add to that, Dave.
All right. Well, I'm going to start from the top and work my way down really quick. So first off, so pyramid scheme. There's no doubt that you can make a comparison to everything being a pyramid scheme in life whenever it's money exchanging hands, especially in stuff like this. I'm not going to say it's kind of like a dirty way of talking about a hobby, because when you start saying things like that, it does kind of, I don't know, it's a dirty word in a lot of things when you're talking about business. But I want to start from like the, people coming in and kind of like what the difference over the years have been. So we talk about people coming in and spending money or spending their 401k, putting everything into this. Here's the reality. People open bars, people do a lot of things with their money if they believe in themselves. And some people believe that coming into this could be something that is beneficial for them, maybe from a financial end, and also maybe beneficial on I'm enjoying what I'm doing end of things. Now I will say that the shelf life on people, I've always said it's around 5 years, because if you buy babies, it takes about 3 years to get your collection up to size. 1 year of breeding, maybe you make some mistakes, and usually by the next year, you got to figure it out. And if you can keep it together for 5 years, you might have a fighting chance to get a decade out of it. Now for people that come in and fail, maybe from bad advice and things like that, you can give 10 different people $10,000 and they're going to all be in different places in the hobby right now. So, you got to keep that into one of the reasons that this just doesn't work for everybody. I know a lot of people that came in with nothing that are very successful. I know people that came in with a ton of money. Half of them are gone. Half of them are still doing it. And I do think that selling success is not a bad thing. The reality is from the outside looking in, people don't want to think this is just a labor job, but the reality is this is a labor job. You're constantly cleaning, you're constantly doing maintenance. You're constantly trying to figure out ways to do better. And usually the people that don't, again, will fall off and fail. I think it's individual cases. And, I think one tough thing about this conversation too, which, establishing the ground rules leading up to it, are we only talking ball pythons? When I look at different species in the industry, they're worth a lot more money today than they were 8 years ago, and they're holding pretty steady. And one thing I have noticed in the industry over the years is where gecko species like leopard geckos will bring people in because it's easy. Now that we have ball pythons figured out, people can come in easily and work with those species. Usually when the sales slow down on that species that was their training wheels, they tend to go to all these other species, rhino rat snakes, smaller pythons from Australia, maybe a lizard species that they like. I don't think it's always the best idea for someone to jump in the hobby and go after a very difficult species, because that can be very, very discouraging. Think of all the people that bought Bolins in the 2000s and failed with them and either killed them or just weren't successful breeding them. I feel like it's only been the last 5 to 7 years that there's been success. And it's only because we've actually looked at the function of the animal, how they are in the wild. And now that we've actually paid attention, we're like, oh, well, this is what we've been doing wrong. And there's a lot of people that are doing it. We just had the clutch in Kansas City, Missouri that a breeder had. William will name drop him in a second. I always forget names. But again, it was a difficult species that a lot of people gave up on. But a couple people paid attention. Ari did a lot of really great research in the wild, figured out some stuff that made it easier for people. But as a whole, I think this hobby's always had the up and down. I think ball pythons are usually the one thing that gets the most attention. And I always say that the highs and lows of the ball python usually affect the rest of the industry. Now, in a positive way, when us ball python people stop making money, we put it into other parts of the hobby. And I think that goes a long way. And honestly, a lot of the sales I make on different species I'm working with, a lot of times is funded with ball python money. Same thing, I always argue with shows. We argue there might be too many shows right now, and, we don't have to get into that argument on this one. But, a lot of these shows exist because of ball python breeders, which gives opportunities for other breeders to sell anything that they want, any rare species, so on and so forth. One more thing, again, going back to, the strength of the hobby right now, let's just say Woma pythons. I feel like 5 years ago, Woma pythons were very difficult to sell. Price was pretty low on my table a lot of times, or $150 online. And then during COVID, when we had all these new people come in and want to be a part of the hobby, they went after these rare, unique, nostalgic animals in the hobby, like Womas, like Dumeral boas, and there was none available. So the price shot up, and that market stayed there for a little while. And there's always going to be a different factor on what's going to bring a market up and down, and economy could have something to do with it. But again, I'm looking at a lot of these more rare species or more random species that you just don't see a lot of anymore, and they're still holding very true. They're still selling very regularly. I think that when we get on Facebook and social media, in my opinion, does kind of hurt this nowadays compared to what it used to. But on social media, when there's all the doom and gloom posts all day, 2007, 2008, we pretty much would go on Fauna and see 7 new collections up for sale. Same thing on King's Snake, 30 collections up for sale. Again, we're not always going to succeed at this. And the reality, and I'm sure Rob will agree, if we all did succeed, we would overproduce for what the demand in the United States are for animals. And then hopefully, maybe you're clever, you're able to export certain things. But, the exportation of stuff too has to be a factor in this. Black milks went up to hundreds of dollars after being a under $100 animal, but that was because the Asian market took onto them. So even with blue tongue skinks, when we had the surge in the United States and people in Hong Kong were buying them, that brought the price up. The demand was there. So there's always a lot of factors, but I will say that the more, outside of maybe boa constrictors, crested geckos, bearded dragons, ball pythons, and, I'll say corn snakes too. There's still enough of those being produced. Those are the markets I feel like you're going to see the most of a roller coaster in. In a lot of these other markets, I find that the roller coaster has been pretty steady for you guys, if not really kind of better for you guys right now. So, I don't know if the market's dead. And, when you bring up ball pythons, you kind of made the point I wanted to make. First it was chasing imports, and that was the main thing. We all just wanted that brand new project to develop ourselves. Then it was, okay, cool. Well, look what happened when I put these 3 together. Wow, reduce the pattern down to nothing and look at the white up the side. That was exciting. Then there was a new norm, and then there was a new norm, and then there was a new norm. Every few years we decide a new direction that we're going to take ball pythons, and sometimes it's guided by either one force in the hobby, that one guy that everybody looks up to, that maybe does something that you couldn't think of yourself. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but I think more people in a market is better because you get more directions to go in. I can't always know what I want to do for breeding, but when somebody does the right breeding that I like, well, now I have a direction. And a lot of this is kind of copycat stuff, and sometimes we get lucky along the way to make some cool animals. But, again, too, with these discussions, I really think it all starts with, mainly ball pythons and how that market's doing. Because, again, the reality is that ball python money spreads its way all over the hobby. Everybody gets a taste of that, whether they believe it or not. And I think that's something to keep into consideration. But, again, other market species right now, I'm seeing hognose flying off the shelves. My buddy Junior is killing it every show. I'm seeing a lot of people sell a lot of stuff. I just think that we're hung up on ball pythons right now, like we always are. I think that we got away from making certain pets, and we've neglected the fact that the pet market's always going to be there. We need new animals for the pet market now. And to make new animals for the pet market without making some of the old classics means what you thought was investable is no longer investable. And that is the truth. So sometimes in ball pythons, I think that fads happen, and I think fads will affect the species as a whole until somebody creates a new fad that we all need. And like William said, recessive's been king for a long time. Everybody said recessive was safe. Recessive's not safe anymore. Everybody has a collection completely built around recessive. So all they have to do is add one codominant gene into a recessive, and it's treating a codom like breeding to your normals back in the day. So that's also affecting the market when we're all chasing the same thing. So again, I don't, I always have a lot of faith in the ball python market because I've seen so many crashes over the years. We saw bananas go from $15,000 down to $1,000 in just a year or two. We saw the GHI follow it, and I didn't even think it should have. But at the same time, simultaneously, they went down in price. And then we've also seen a lot of projects, and Desert Ghost is the best example, that was in the industry for over 10, 20 years. Nobody wanted it. Kevin McCurley did some cool stuff. A couple other guys stuck with it, made some combos. And it was just kind of like, Now, literally, if you don't have Desert Ghost in your collection, or Desert Ghost Hypo, or Desert Ghost Clown Hypo in your collection, you don't even have a relevant collection in the modern day ball python world. So I always think there's a lot of factors in all this. I hate to shit on the market because I've seen it come up and down so many times. But I will say that I do think there's going to be a pretty big correction in ball pythons based on some projects that just aren't what they used to be. And the fact that there's so many new people in doing similar projects right now, that the assumption, like Rob said, that you're going to create something that somebody already created and somebody's going to want it. Sometimes that's not how it works. Sometimes, that'll give you a little direction, but if you're always copying somebody else, you're not going to be successful. So in my opinion, don't follow the trends. You need to be a trendsetter, and trendsetters always have a moment in ball pythons.
Okay. Now I got something to say about that. So
tons here. Tons here.
Say what again?
There's a ton here.
Oh, yeah,
we'll have to go for a while.
Okay, so Dave, what you said about the species, I get that. But the thing is, I think the species is just going to be a delayed market dip. I won't say market crash, but a lot of the miscellaneous stuff is going to take longer because generally speaking, a lot of the people getting into this miscellaneous stuff, or at least people who are getting either larger quantities or bigger groups of them, are typically ball python people or people who do other common species that are like, well, maybe in their head, if I get something rarer or something different, that'll help me out. So a lot of times that'll be a little bit of a delay. And most of the time what happens when people do that is, especially if you come with the mindset of a ball python, a male breeds in 5 months or a female breeds in 12 months, and people want to take that same mentality and try to bring it over to a different species. And frankly, you end up wrecking a lot of those species. Or sometimes it's delayed because you do have people who listen. So some people, it's either going to take them longer or they're going to kill them all by getting them too fat or just wrecking them. So I think a lot of that other species is going to be a delayed, and you're seeing some of it dip down now. It's not that it's not, it's just, it's more steady. Because I think a lot of that rush were ball python people who are getting that stuff. Now it's starting to peter off, and a lot of them already have it. Because the thing is with the species, and I tell people this, it's not a species that's going to help fix the market. The problem is with the species, when you start putting too much emphasis on one species and everyone produces that one species, you're going to crash the market a whole lot faster. Because the harsh reality is a savu is a savu. A white lip is a white lip. A scrub python is a scrub python. Well, obviously different species, but there's not different morphs, and that's what's given the ball pythons and so many of these other animals, longevity in the hobby and so much more financial gain is because of the morphs. Let's face it, you can get a lot of one species just in different paint jobs. A lot of these other species you can't. So if I bred white lips and 10 other people bred white lips, well, then the market's probably going to go to shit relatively quick. So, and that's just, any species like Antaresia would be another one, people would want to get Antaresia till they have to feed a bunch of Antaresia babies. And they're just going to be like, well, this isn't a ball python. Why would I do this? Or something along that line. And frankly, a lot of the problem I have with a lot of times the ball python people getting a lot of this stuff is, a lot of times it ends up becoming, they'll treat that kind of stuff as one species, right? And that's what I think complexes are interesting, is why all these different animals evolved to become what they are today. But a lot of new people who get into them, especially with that ball python mentality, tend to, just like the boas, Dave, they just fuck it up. They go, there's only one boa, or they just don't care and they breed it all together. That's why in some ways I'm kind of glad the Antaresia morphs aren't here, because guess what? They would magically all become one species and everyone would breed all of them together. And then you got people like Justin, who's dedicated 20 years of his life to that species, going like, wow, we had such a prime opportunity to do some really cool stuff, and everyone goes and fucks it up, pisses in the punch bowl, if you will. So I don't necessarily think that getting into different species is going to save you, unless I wouldn't even save you if you're passionate about it. But if you like a different species, makes it easier to sell, because you speak differently when you're excited about something compared to something you're just, trying to just get rid of because you're tired of it. I'm sure Justin and Rob, you've been on the phone with Nick or something like that. When he gets to talking to you, he gets you excited about whatever species it is. There's a reason for it. If you're passionate about it, it makes it easier to sell. But the thing is, if you just go into it with the mindset of the morph aspect of it, when a lot of these, no other species has morphs like ball pythons, so you almost can't equate them to being the same, And like I said, I think the markets will dip even further with other species. I just think it's going to be a bit more delayed for a few reasons. Either people get them and wreck the species, or the people who do listen, it's just going to take longer because it's going to take them a while to get them up to size. Uh-oh, did we lose Dave? I didn't mean to piss you off, Dave.
Well, so Will, the first thing I'll say, just for clarity and, to be on the same page with this, I'm the only person in the world that Nick doesn't keep on the phone. So no, I've talked to him. I think I've talked to him 3 or 4 times for a combined 12 minutes. So I'm the one person in the world that has that situation. So I can't relate. Sorry.
It's amazing.
You tell him to shut up and just. I don't even like pythons. I'm a colubrid and boa guy.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's it. It's intrinsic in there somewhere. I don't know. So I guess we'll continue a little bit in the interim. I know how that. Certainly, I feel for Dave on this. It's happened to me. I guess the thing that I would first say is that when you mentioned, okay, if there are actually 10 clutches of white lips out there, that they might be, quote, less cool or whatever. I think there's something intrinsic to that too, where the fact that they're no longer as unattainable or as I'll be seen as the cool guy. If 10 people in the U.S. produce them in a given year, then maybe it seems easier. So there's less of that appeal that it's this challenge and I'll be special for having done it. Right. And that's obviously not everyone has that viewpoint, but I do think there's some aspect of that. And certainly, so there was a ton here from what Dave said, and mostly I'm aligned with him. And I think actually until the end when he gave us a big critical point. So I agree with Dave that the whole situation with people dipping into 401ks or putting a mortgage on their house to buy reptiles isn't new. I mean, I think the first time I saw it was in 2004 at Daytona, talking with the guy who just gotten a second mortgage on his house to buy ball pythons. And who knows, maybe if he'd picked the right thing, maybe that would actually have turned out really well. And maybe it did. I don't even know the specifics or how it went for him or whatever, because you'd be on the very front end of all that stuff. So definitely, not unique or new, but I do, so I take that point really well. I agree with Dave totally that both reptiles and heck, you were mentioning the trouble with rodents and all that stuff, all of those things, it's like being a farmer. It really is the labor. It's showing up every day. It's really a test. If you have success or not is going to be defined by whether you can have that mentality of showing up to work every day, because that's really what it takes. It's not that it's hard. I mean, you have to maybe have some intrinsic sense of it, or at least be open to reading your animals and say, hey, what is it that you're telling me? As opposed to, it's not, I would say baking a cake, except I live at altitude, so that doesn't even work, right? If you just follow the non-altitude recipe, it doesn't work. But it's a test of your own perseverance and your willingness to put in that labor. So I think that's a great point from Dave there. I also totally agree that there's still interest in different things. And so fundamentally, I think what we're talking about now is sort of the big ticket items and the question of, quote, investment and that sort of atmosphere. I mean, heck, people have been keeping reptiles for a century in captivity. More than that, I'm sure. But in terms of easily recorded in the United States, this is what they're doing. There's an interest in different things or more difficult things. That's definitely the case. And I do think, to Dave's point, that when someone sits there at the reptile show with their table full of ball pythons, and even the people who love ball pythons don't stop. The natural incentive is one of two things. Either you're, to Dave's point, right? Either you're going to get out entirely or you're going to go into something else. I do think that's totally the case. And there has been, it's been fascinating over the last 20 years, like 20, 25 years ago, just based on the content that was available. It was far more common for people to sort of be exposed to a breadth of things and then pick a narrow lane and go forward in that, right? So it would be, I'm aware, Kevin McCurley is aware of all the snakes in the world, or at least, I mean, heck, read O'Shea's book, there's a heck of a lot of them, but aware of 40% of the snakes that are in the world and chooses a lane and goes down it. Brian, same way. So that, there's that path. Subsequently, because of the success and sort of, as Dave talked about, sort of the lifestyle of some of the really notable or successful, particularly in a business sense, folks who are selling it as a lifestyle, there have been a ton of people who joined the reptile hobby who only know those sort of common items. They didn't come from a breadth and then narrow down. They came from this super narrow exposure. And then maybe when they're either based on success in that, causing them to spread their wings into different things, or the lack of success saying, hey, I love reptiles, but this clearly isn't working. Let me try something else. You have these people who have come in from narrow and are only now seeing the broad universe, right? And there is definitely growth potential there because, again, there's, 5,000 different snake species, or it's squamates, and then it's 1,500 serpents or whatever it is, right? This is the second show in a row that I've mentioned that. I really should look and define that figure so I can reference it appropriately. Something to note for next week. Okay, cool. I agree that, social media, full of doom and gloom. That's sort of its intrinsic nature. That's not unique to reptiles. That's sort of how people are on there for whatever reason. Don't love it. I mostly avoid it. Cultivate your exposure for sure.
Right.
And I agree that, failure with the hard stuff is part of the allure, right? That, Dave, another great point. I totally agree. And I think so 2 more things. You said, Dave, that the investable is no longer investable. Totally agree. There are definitely different things out there. It's just if we're approaching sort of this discussion as saying like the things that are known to be the quote investment quality animal. Yeah, I think that's the stuff that we're really questioning here, because as I say, people have kept reptiles for a century. All of this has no bearing on whether I will keep reptiles. My ability to sell reptiles will not affect whether I keep reptiles. Not at all. And I'm definitely not unique in that. Finally, some of the stuff, if we just talk about it, say like, heck, bananas, you talked about the market situation with bananas. That's a cool snake, man. That is, someone just walks up to the table. There's no sales pitch. That thing looks cool. A pied, same thing. Someone who doesn't know reptiles, that's a cool looking animal. And that hasn't changed. It's just sort of all this extra baggage that we're bringing with it. Finally, I would just say there's definitely a market for if you like what other people don't like, right? Like in the sense of there's less competition if you're out there in this space doing your own thing. And that's really, I think, maybe the part when we say, or if we're talking about, is the industry having a problem, to the extent it means doing what everyone else is doing? Yeah, probably. But if people then have opened their mind to all these different things and are willing to like what other people don't like, I think there's a ton of growth there.
Yeah. I want to jump in just with an example from my own experience. About 25 years ago, I really got into carpet pythons, kind of discovered them, as I was looking into the Australian reptiles and just fell in love with them. When I was buying my first jungle carpets, they were a couple $100, but nothing too terrible. But, as I found out later, they were just coming off of their huge wave of popularity and kind of hitting that trough. So I kind of got them on the downward curl. And by the time I raised them up and bred them, they were kind of surging again, coming up on the wave. And so I was able to sell them very easily, very quickly, and for good money, So it was kind of like But then a few years later, I saw that they kind of dipped in price and they weren't selling as quickly and things like that. And I think anytime you're in this, working with something you love because you love it, not because of its market value, you're going to see that peaks and waves, and maybe you don't breed as many that year, that they're in the trough, and then you breed more when they come, out there riding that wave. But I do think that it's very important to have a champion, for that animal. And I think if you're kind of behind the scenes and you're quiet and nobody knows about you, the animals you're championing probably aren't going to get the limelight they deserve. Whereas if you put yourself out there, make YouTube videos, hype them up, I think about all the benefits I've gotten from Morelia Pythons Radio talking about how cool inlands are. When I first saw inlands, I thought they were kind of ugly coastals because I just seen them in pictures. And I saw some in person. I'm like, this is a completely different animal than I thought it was. And then I got them in hand, and I brought some over from Europe. They were fantastic. Calmest carpet. They'll just, sit, they're the perfect pet carpet python, in my opinion. And after, 10 or so years of Morelia Pythons Radio, kind of singing their praises, they've kind of become a lot more popular. And my waiting list for inland carpets is, quite long right now. So, I think that championing and sticking with the project, even when it's in its trough, is worthwhile as well. And I think, I guess my kind of point on this is that's kind of the true hobby. And so I don't think that will ever die, because there's going to be some kid that just loves reptiles just like we do. They don't know why, they just do, and they love what they love, and they don't care what's popular or expensive or not expensive. And some of the coolest reptiles are not expensive, and they're, looked at as trash species by people trying to make money, but they could be the coolest species in the world. And you can get a lot of, benefit out of keeping and breeding those. And who knows, maybe if the imports stop, those things will shoot up in price. And that kid that just had that passion will all of a sudden make all this money because of something they love. But, I think, like Rob said, we're going to keep them whether they're worth anything or not. It's just kind of the passion in us. Go ahead, Dave.
So do you hear me okay? All right. Yep. So, and here's the thing. And again, when you're working with anything that's alive, if there's not a passion there, you can't put it in the closet and forget about it. So, where some of us do make the assumption or the stereotype that some people come in for the money, again, those people never make it, in my opinion. If they can't do the day job, they're not going to get the paycheck. And again, the toughest thing about these these conversations is there's always so many different variables in every species we can talk about. That's kind of where I'm like, man, we should really just focus on maybe like the ball pythons and their effect on the rest of the industry a little bit. That's where I'll probably argue through this. Do we just lose him too? But yeah, so here's the thing. So first off, Will, you made the comment about morphs coming into a species and you don't want anybody muddying up the waters based on morphs. And I understand that, but also you don't really have any control over what people do after an animal leaves your house. And when it comes to mutations, and the Australians have proved it, and I always make blue-tongued skinks as the example, the crossing of Easterns and Northerns in different mutations is common practice over there. And I'm sure in other Australian species, it's probably pretty common practice for them to cross things, so they don't look at it as a bad thing. Over here, where those kinds of things are sought after, you want it to be pure. Same thing with like dwarf boa constrictors. I know people that want pure Costa Ricans, pure Hondurans, like everything's got to be pure. And then you get some people that are just very morph motivated and say, man, if I put this T positive Argentine with this other animal and then maybe breed it back again, what am I going to get? And, again, they're mutations. I don't find it a problem when people are mixing mutations. In boa constrictors, it's kind of just common knowledge that most stuff is going to be hybrids, especially if you're in Colombian mutations. And when people buy into it, they don't really think about it that way. So, every one of these projects, every one of these species, it's always going to be treated differently. That's again up to you as management on your own projects and your own business. But again, even, like Justin said, man, people want your stuff that you're producing. You got a waiting list, and that's not going to change. And me with skinks, I got into skinks because I thought they were an amazing animal. I thought they were a good alternative than a bearded dragon as a beginner pet. Easier diet, more extreme temperatures. in my opinion, I think they handle a lot better too. And for a long time, they were $75, and they were $125, and they were $150, and then the variable. Barczyk goes to Australia. He goes to Joe Ball's house. We see all these mutations we'll never have, but we always assume we'll get everything. We then all of a sudden see Brian talking about him on snake bites weekly. Everybody wanted skinks, and you remember that market. People were selling normals for $450. Some people were marking them up to $800-900, and people were buying them. It all came down to a supply and demand. A demand was created overnight, unexpectedly. And for people who had stuck it out with that species, Fenn, Ray Gerge, guys that put in 25 years, were so fortunate for those 20 years of nobody giving a shit about what they were doing to suddenly selling out to everybody. And they had a couple of really great years. And then I hate to say it, things leveled out, and there was a lot of variables again within that species. But, like I said, I think the most volatile market in this whole industry will always be ball pythons. I think ball pythons are always going to have these crazy extreme highs and lows. It's going to be stressful. I think some people are going to find it comical because they think they're right because they said things were going to crash. But, again, it's all supply and demand. Again, we don't, that market, again, reinvents itself. That market never says, okay, it's over. They say, cool. Well, I'm going to try this really quick and hope for the best. Or I'm going to try this really quick. Or, hey, I'm going to try this. And even though it doesn't look good, I'm going to talk about it so fucking much, you're going to want it anyways. So like I said, a lot of variables and all this kind of stuff, a lot of species variables and all this. And I really think everything comes to supply and demand. And again, I mean, there's a lot of other correlations within the economy you can put against what we're doing in our industry. When the stock market's strong, our industry is strong. When the stock market's weak, our industry's a little weaker. There's so many different things, again, variables that are going to put this market in a bunch of different directions. Another thing that, maybe it's a whole debate in itself. What have we been saying for 20 years? What's the next ball python? What's the next ball python? What's that next species? Everyone thought it was going to be blood pythons for a while when you saw Tracy Barker in her galleries every day showing new mutations. Other snake-wise boa constrictors had a chance, but that is a species that is larger, not everybody can work with. Again, variables, there's 1 million mutations in retics. They are beautiful. Can everybody handle a retic? No. So even though that is a market that has 1 million mutations, it's not a strong market because of it. Where other species give them a lot of mutations. Crested geckos the last 5 years in the hobby are everything ractodactylus. You gave crested geckos true mutations, and you suddenly saw crested geckos selling for $37,000 for 2 simple mutations put together, and people bought them. I watched a guy make over $600,000 at a single show selling only crested geckos. I called Pete Call up and asked him what his best day ever in boas and ball pythons were. I hit up everybody thinking there'd be like a number close to it. A third at best on a best weekend ever with a customer come over to their house afterwards to spend a lot of money. So again, morph motivated for sure. Other markets overseas will affect what's going on here. And, if you look to and what the world market's like, it all starts with the United States a lot of times. And that's why I always argue that Europe has some of the best looking of everything because they cherry picked the best things we made for years, brought them in and only bred the best of the best. And that's why you saw some of the better leopard gecko projects over there being done. That's why some of the pastel lineages of boa constrictors and like purple sharp albinos look better there. Nothing compared to what we're making here. They had good ingredients and they made better stuff. And again, the crested gecko market, it's because the Asian market, the Korean market went nuts. They got them. They have them now. They're not buying them like they were. Like I said, there's always going to be a roller coaster and there's always going to be a variable. And, sometimes you can make guesses on markets. The reality is if you focused on the Madagascar market and when you knew it was going to shut down certain species, if you had those species laying around and maybe held on to them for 5 months, they're probably worth 5 times what they were when you first got them in. Monkey tail skinks in this industry. Every time they rediscover a new island with monkey tail skinks, the price plummets because there's all of a sudden monkey tail skinks everywhere. Then we can't, I don't want to say take all of them, but take so many that suddenly we can't take them anymore. And then all of a sudden you see monkey tail skinks for $1,200 to $1,600 to $1,800. Like I said, this market just always finds a way, in my opinion. I don't think this market will fail, but I do think people within the market will fail because that's just what business is.
Okay, so you led me down a bunch of rabbit holes I kind of want to chit chat about. So this might be something Rob might know more about. So first of all, I think we should be more concerned about what we're crossing into what, because, you know, with a lot of these the laws and everything, bans on all these different species, and like Burmese pythons, being banned in Georgia and stuff like that. It was because of, I guess they were worried about the worm that's in their lung killing and harming native species. That, when a 18-foot berm has a worm and it goes into or gets transferred into like a 12-inch snake, then it's a little bit different, or something like that. But with that is my question more towards Rob, because you might know more about this than probably any of us three. But so if we just, like Bob Clark, for instance, crossing a bunch of ball pythons with retics and berms, what happens if you can't sell it to Georgia at that point, right? Or you can't send them to Florida because they're at least half. What happens if we start getting all these crosses? Well, then we're going to crash a market if we can't send them anywhere, because we decided the willy-nilly. This is becoming a hybrid talk, but I promise it could crash a market pretty quick if we can't sell these animals because, it's 3/4 berm or it's half berm. Well, let's just ban it all then, because we just can't. We don't know what it is. We'd rather be safe than sorry, right? At least I'm sure that's what those states are going to think when they, if they look into.
Can I say one thing on that really quick?
Yes. Go ahead, Dave.
I'm sorry. So, and you're breaking up a little bit, but so here's the thing. I don't think anything in government will ever be like, hey, look, this is a 95% this, it's banned. My biggest concern with that would be when they say pythons are banned in every state, and anything that falls under a python category falls in that category. So, I mean, I keep that in consideration because, I think that, you remember the papers that were wrote on green anacondas that broke it up into 3 species. And that was one of the arguments made when we had the Lacey Act thrown at us the first time around. And, too, with Burmese pythons, you could have said that market was dead, but when they got limited to only selling their animals within their own state, a normal Burmese python was whatever that guy in that state wanted to charge because he had no competition anymore. I saw albinos at the show for $450, $650 in Tennessee. Before that, you saw them for $125 on a table. So, laws will, of course, affect us, but it doesn't necessarily ruin.
How long will that actually last? That might be good for one season, but then you're going to cut your market quick or fairly quick by doing that. So that's a good short-term resolution, but it's not something that's going to, get you by for the next 20 or 30 years. That's only going to work. And then obviously state by state, it's going to vary too, because, certain states, there's probably going to be less people who are interested in that stuff than others, compared to like Missouri to California or something like that. So I don't necessarily think that's true. That it'll work. It might work for a little bit, but it's certainly not a long-term thing.
So let's just say that guy in Tennessee that decided to stick it out in his own state, he might not have realized that his animals were even worth as much as they were. And I can say that based on the fact that also a lot of those big constrictor breeders ran to Texas because their biggest market was in Texas. There was a lot of sales coming out of that state for these animals. And then when they all got down there and their market was so oversaturated, there was a failure there. And they went out of business, and a lot of them did. And honestly, too, if you look at the berm market, just with what that roller coaster's been, so you had them get banned. You thought they were gone forever. You suddenly were the only guy in your state. You made a fortune because you had no competition. Yes, probably over a 5-6 year period after that, you would have competition, and then it'd be a different game. But the laws got changed, and they didn't have to worry about that. But if you go back to 2008 or even 2009 and say, hey, did you know there's going to be pied berm someday and we're going to charge $15,000? People would have thought you were crazy because they would have thought they wouldn't even be able to sell that animal if they had that animal. But everything changed. And the thing is laws are always out of your control. Try to find things that you think might slip through the cracks. But, again, they could say python, and man, we lose all our pythons.
Well, yeah, I could see that. I don't know. I think it's just, if ball pythons, I think it'd just be harder to go after. And so that's why I'm wondering, well, if they're hybrids, wouldn't it just be easier just to get rid of, or just stop it there compared to just, banding. I don't know. I guess I don't see the ball python. I see that being more likely than them banding ball pythons outright, at least in my mind. But as I said, I think Rob might probably be able to speak more on that than I would. It was just something came to mind when I was seeing Bob putting like a berm ball back to a berm or back to a ball python or something. I was like kind of curious how that would play out. Like if you were to send that animal to Florida, I would assume you couldn't, but.
Yeah, that's an interesting legal question, right? And it's going to presumably vary by state, where it's both in terms of legally and in terms of enforcement, for sure. The interesting thing is that if you're talking about things that are Endangered Species Act listed, hybrids of endangered species that are listed so you can't sell them across state lines, those actually are not protected because they're hybrids. So they're no longer the endangered species. So the most common context for that you see is the Cyclura lewisi, the Grand Cayman iguana hybrids. So some of those that are actually sold as hybrids are actually not. This has been there have been various projects over time where folks have been able to take blood samples, and then it turns out, actually, what I bought as hybrids are actually not hybrids. They're pure Grand Cayman iguanas, and at least one person then alerted the Federal Fish and Wildlife about that, and they came and took them. So that was kind of funny out of that whole deal. So that in the endangered species context, the way the law is written, it's actually legal to sell something that would be illegal if it wasn't a hybrid because of that. But in terms of what you're talking about with state by state legislation in terms of banning different forms of animals and things, yeah, that's going to be hyper specific. So I couldn't give feedback on that, but it definitely made me think of it when you just mentioned sort of the legalities of hybrids question. Yeah, that's an interesting one from the record book.
Galops kind of fall under that too, right? The Galapagos tortoises, they could have them because they were hybrids, and
yeah. So if they are hybrids, then you can sell them for sure. Yeah.
Does anybody know how it works with tegus? Because, that's definitely a species that those rules are starting to bleed into the neighboring states of Florida. Is there any rules in and out with hybridization with those?
So in that case, I think probably it's going to be like what you mentioned, Dave, where that for the most part, and I don't know the specifics, either in Florida or across those states as to how the legislation is written. But in general, I would assume that's probably more likely to go to the general level or even above that in terms of saying what that ban looks like, particularly in local municipalities, right? I know Chris Paintshaw is not the first reptile keeper who lives in Corpus Christi, Texas, and they have some pretty egregious, at least from a sort of captive husbandry side law, in terms of particularly. So I think all Boyd snakes are prohibited within the city of Corpus Christi. Which is pretty crazy. And isn't it Gus Renfro used to live down there, and that actually caused him to get out of keeping reptiles. A famous boa breeder, right, was living there, and either that law changed and he wasn't aware of it or whatever, but there came a day where there was awareness around that, and he had to get rid of all of his animals because of that. Not even state level, but being in Texas, otherwise an open state, but that particular municipality has a pretty draconian view of the whole thing, where you keep colubrids. So there's a handful of colubrid breeders down there, but that's about it.
Yeah. Houston is the same way. Houston has an 8-foot rule. Anything that can exceed 8 feet is illegal in the county. I don't remember what the name of the county is, but that are regulations you'll see at any Houston show you go to. I'm scared we're getting off topic, by the way.
Well, I can maybe bring us back on topic a little bit with I think something that indicates the strength of the market and the reptile industry as a whole is all the supporting products. You've got your caging manufacturers, lighting, feeders, all sorts of different aspects of the support industry. And I think honestly, that helps strengthen our industry as a whole and makes it harder for legislation to get rid of it, because when they see the amount of money, not just on the reptiles themselves or that whole concept of blurring the lines with legal and illegal, imports and things like that. But when they can say, no, look at this industry, look at all this money that's being made in the sale of caging or feeders or whatever. I think that really shows that this industry is not going away. It's only becoming stronger. You keep seeing new innovations, the new lighting systems that are coming out where you can have, a gradual light appear, the Arcadia lighting stuff, and just different innovations and different things coming, products. I mean, you've got the whole crested and other, Rhacodactylus type geckos being surrounded by the feed, the food, and several different people manufacturing crested gecko food, and just really speaks to that, I think.
Sorry, I kept hitting the button. It didn't go. Yeah, again, I look at prices on certain things, and I think people are doing better than ever. I do think there's a lot of really great new products coming out. I do think that, another thing too, like even talking Patreon groups, there's a lot of people that are active in a lot of Patreon groups that are members of a lot of Patreon groups. I mean, you know what it was like back in the day. If you wanted a one-on-one with the breeder, you got to hope they either answer the phone or you go down to Daytona and go to the BOA conference and hope that Jeremy Stone, all those guys are there hanging out, whatever it shits up to be. So I do think that we're always finding new ways to make it a little more, like you said, modernized. We are no longer backyard breeders like we might have been in the beginning. We're no longer just taking melamine and building racks. And don't get me wrong, some of us are doing that. Nothing wrong with that. But, the caging's getting better. The rack systems, if you choose the rack systems, are getting better. The polycarbonate tubs on rack systems that look like they're just aquariums in a sense. There's just so many things that, just keep on fueling the industry and keep on showing it's expanding. Now, I will say the professionalism might not be good enough when it comes to government. I remember we used the argument back in the day, look how much of this we spend money on. Look at FedEx, look at bedding, look at all these things that are going to get affected when we're gone. I don't think that's ever going to really matter. I have a buddy that's in politics, and he had made a comment while talking to one of those bigger hedge funds. He said that the biggest issue that our industry is going to have is that you don't have a side. Democrat, Republicans, you don't have a side. One of them doesn't go with you. They both hate you equally in a sense, or they both like you equally in a sense. So, not necessarily having a side to hold on to, I think is always going to hurt us on that. And again, I think when it comes to laws and regulations, that is just a variable when it comes to the strength of this market that we cannot control. But again, it is something that blue tongue skinks are back to my example. When we were able to export them, the market was stronger. We can't export anymore as far as I'm aware. I keep on hearing that some you can, some you can't. But for the most part, I hear skinks are a no-no. So with them being a no-no, hell, knobtails is another good example. I'm sure you understand that market. Those can't be exported like they were before. So that market completely changes because that market was being propped up by the overseas market and the Asian market. So, regulations are that one variable when it comes to this market crashing you have no control over, and you will see price fluctuations in species based on regulations that are coming into play with government.
Yeah, there was a really good talk Steve Sykes gave at the Gecko Symposium at Tinley last October, where he talked about that very thing, where different countries and their I guess buying strategies or the stuff they were interested in and how, shutting down or different countries slowing down on their orders from stuff from the US affects the market and affects how the pricing on things here. Because if you're all of a sudden not allowed to export, then all of a sudden you have a surplus in the US because most of that stuff was going elsewhere. So that does definitely impact it. But also those things kind of ebb and flow too. It could naturally slow down, but it could also slow down because of government intervention. And, if you're in this long enough, you see those cycles and you see somebody get into the whatever office or whatever decision-making area and change the rule and say, no, we're going to go ahead and allow this export. Or you have a champion that's going out there and saying, hey, you're impacting my business. We need to be able to export these. These are all captive bred. There's no illegal activity going on. We need to make this happen. And they change the rule or make it allowable to export again. So, again, I think, when we work together and we band together and we, I guess another great example of that is the USARC and some of the other organizations that are there to kind of help fight for our rights and represent us in a respectable and professional manner. That definitely helps. I think where we fail is when we're divided, and, I'm a Python guy, so I don't care about the gecko guys, or I'm a tortoise guy, I don't care about the lizard people, that kind of thing. It can definitely hurt us. When we band together and we have bigger numbers, we're stronger and we have more of a voice. So I think organizations like USARC really help us come together with a kind of coherent strategy to prevent some of these bad things from affecting our industry.
So, Justin and even you, Dave, brought up a good point. So when certain species get, there's no longer imports or exports even of certain species. I think it works up to a point, but I think the problem is most reptile people don't understand or not understand, but I guess they just moderation. They just keep wanting to go bigger and bigger, and they want to keep growing. It's not like most businesses, there's only so many people that are going to be able to keep or want to keep blue-tongued skinks. It's not like something you have to have. And that was always something I was never a big fan of, was when people equate this to the farming, because these are animals you keep as pets. These aren't animals that are going to become food products or something. If rodents, I would consider more farming. Reptiles, I don't think you can consider it the same thing, because you're talking about an animal like a ball python, for instance. The St. Louis Zoo has one that's 62 years old, and that's just a snake. That's not including tortoises and turtles, that live twice that or more, So I feel like we just, my question, I have kind of a question I wanted to ask you. Do you think in this day of age, do we really need big breeding facilities? I know gourmet rodent isn't a thing anymore, but some of these other places, these big franchises that supply the Petco and PetSmart, because I remember the talk back in the day was, Petco and PetSmarts would get people into the hobby, but I don't know if that's true anymore, especially after COVID, when everything become more digital. I'm almost willing to bet. I bet when you add someone like Brian Barczyk, Snake Discovery, a lot of those people are probably creating more, eyes on this industry than even Petco and PetSmart are. Because why would I go out if I don't have to leave my house? I could either watch it at home, and then if I want to get a reptile, I'll just get on Morph Market or get on some reptile site, or for whatever reason. So that was something I was kind of curious about, and particularly Dave's opinion, because I know he was very much so for the, everyone having their thing. And I just don't know in this day and age if should we even have those big companies anymore,
Capitalism, buddy. I here's the thing. If you find a way to, again, supply a product in the industry and do it in volume and do it successfully, and you're putting out a good product, you're always going to do well. We saw the new facility that Darian posted for roaches. Man, what a beautiful facility. He's found ways to do them in large numbers, not having to worry about things that can go wrong along the way, because he built the right facility out to do it. And I think a lot of these other things we're talking, especially rodents, I do think there's a right way of doing it. I think there's, I wouldn't say a wrong way, but I think there's going to be people that do it in different ways. You see some of these facilities where they have the big ass fans. They have these beautiful metal racks and they're producing rats. And then you go to another guy who's literally using a chicken coop and he's got fans blowing around and he's got no way to regulate his temperatures. He's also producing rats. As long as the product's good in the end, I think that's all that matters. But these big companies will always be
hey, you're talking about, I totally agree with the insects, the feeder stuff that I think could be equated to farming. I'm talking more like when gourmet rodent and all the, pumping out, what was it, 5,000 ball python clutches or whatever. I'm talking animals that would go into the pet trade. It'd be different if the ball pythons were going towards food, but we're talking about the pet trade. He may not be a popular guy, but Sean Bradley had a interesting, he said something pretty interesting. It's like, I made 10,000 cinnamons or something like that, in a course of a year or a couple of years or something. And he's like, where does it go? I want to know, where are all these animals going? They send there a lot of, there's local chains and stuff in the US and everything, but it's like, do we really need to do that anymore? Is there a reasoning for that anymore? That's more what I was talking about. Not so much, I totally get the rodents and the roaches and all that, but I'm talking more of the reptile side of it.
These people that are mass producing or whatever. Well, here's the thing. Gourmet Rodent didn't decide one day they were going to produce 5,000 ball python clutches. Gourmet Rodent organically grew their company to the size that was necessary to supply Petco. Petco had their demands on what they needed, and they have to meet those demands. And if they don't, they get fines. Anytime, if you get an order for 5,000 ball pythons from Petco, and you supply enough to pay for the 1,000 that you didn't give them.
I think, that as long as there's a demand there, I think there's a need for that. I think that's kind of what the roadie's going down there. If the demand leaves, then of course, that changes and Petco and PetSmart make, smaller orders or, that kind of thing. So, I don't have a lot of insights. I remember hearing, Alan Rapace talking about those kind of things with, crested geckos in particular, where he was supplying those chains with crested geckos and kind of the amount of effort it took to build that industry, where he had to come up with the feed and produce enough animals, where he kind of got it down to like maybe more of a farming rather than a breeding program. And I think the I guess scary answer to your question is that a lot of these animals are dying. They're just not making.
I guess that's what I was, more getting at is like, how many more animals can these big franchises take when, like I was telling you, ball pythons live in 30, 50, 60 years. Now at some point that has to stop because the pet keepers are only going to want so many pets. They're not going to want to, well, I would assume they wouldn't want to breed. I know Dave's going to say, we're hoping they become breeders, but I feel like we're just adding more fuel to the fire at that point.
I would probably say if you're, talking about breeders like yourself, then the industry can only support so many. But when you're talking about the kid that's bugging his mom for a snake and she finally breaks down and gets him a ball python and he loses interest in a couple weeks and the ball python just kind of, fades away or is neglected until they put it onto Craigslist and somebody tries to rescue it and it dies, those kind of things. I think, and for every one of you, there's probably 50 of those, where they're just not really into it. And so, the average lifespan of a ball python in the U.S. is not 60 years. It's probably a year or two, with the attention span of kids these days. But I mean, and I think that goes for any age, and that's kind of my problem with the import industry is that it seems to be like just fueling that throwaway pet attitude. And I think as we have these higher priced animals, people care more. They're not just going to say, yeah, go ahead and get that $20 lizard or $20 snake. If it's a $200 snake, they're going to maybe think about it more, plan more so they can be successful. And if they lose interest, then they're going to want to, get some of that money back. So they're going to sell it, they're going to keep it healthy until they can sell it. So I think, as the industry becomes stronger and grows and we see maybe less imports coming in or whatever, and more captive bred animals, then maybe that changes a little. I don't know. That's a hard one.
Well, I think that kind of leads to another discussion is, this polarizing, you guys were talking about, what was it earlier? Divides between species group. I don't really see too much of divide. Maybe ball python people, just because their mindset's just different than other species keepers, from what I've noticed. Not saying it's bad or good or anything of the sort, just different. And I see more of a divide between the breeders and the pet sector. The racks, the cage keepers, those kind of people. And I kind of wonder, with both sides producing so much. Well, I can't speak too much on the pet side, but breeder side for sure. So many people producing so much video content, which I think it's polarizing and it's causing issues as far as, if the guy who probably wanted it as a pet looked at the breeder and, he's glorifying the business aspect of it. Well, after a while, you start seeing that stuff. A lot of times it'll, convince you why racks are better, or why maybe you need to become the next, Justin or Ozzy or something like that. So I kind of wondered, is that a detriment as well? Because I heard of Ryan McVeigh said something I thought was kind of made me think a little bit, but it was because when I kind of thought about maybe doing YouTube videos, but then he said, for reptile breeders, if we're doing YouTube videos, can we do them without having your racks, like a row of racks in the background, or a whole wall of racks? We want this big, just showcase of different animals you have in the background, rather than just showing that animal, because it kind of gives that false sense that, if he could do it, I could do it, or something like that, or someone who probably wasn't even interested in breeding. And I always think that might be the burnout too, is so many people they want to invest so much into this dream, I guess, of, having, Justin, I remember listening to you back, I was listening to him not too long ago, but your old NPR days, and Eric too. Eric had a totally different mindset than he does now, and it's, your mindset can change a lot over time as well. But I kind of wonder, well, if it wasn't portrayed that way, would it have been different? And I think burnout too is if you're only interested in one thing in this hobby, and it's this breeding. If you were going to be a small breeder, maybe if you just kept things in a few cages rather than rack systems, at least for your adults anyways, would it help continue or keep some sort of interest? Because I think that's another thing that gets people in trouble, is if you're keeping in racks, invariably you just get bored because you don't see them like you would in a cage. So what do you usually do? You just keep buying more and more and get more, trade more, just get more animals to kind of fulfill that desire that, you would probably get if you kept them in, a more naturalistic, or not just a nice cage. I won't even say, because everyone's definition of naturalistic or whatever it is will be different. But, I kind of wonder, could that change the hobby in a more of a beneficial way?
I think there is a push towards that, and I think it is strengthening, the true aspect, or the real aspect of the hobby, of the love of the animals. As we're moving towards less animals, or moving away from the rows and rows of racks to maybe each individual animal costs a little more. We're not, trying to provide for PetSmart or something like that. I still think there's a place for that, but the small scale breeders that.
It's a shame Dave's not on right now.
Yeah.
Well, what I was going to say is too, but don't you also think, say with the ball python community, and maybe because the mindset of other species keepers are different, and they will keep in larger enclosures and less animals. Well, if we did that with ball pythons, and I'm not saying everybody, but if say 60% rather than probably 5% of people who breed ball pythons probably keep them in cages or something. Yeah. So wouldn't that increase the value? Wouldn't that keep from these projects as plummeting to nothing? I mean, or at least give it a delay. Obviously, they would still drop if people are breeding them. They're going to still drop, but would it be more of a gradual drop rather than an overnight, panic? Oh my God, it dropped half its price or whatever it is. So I kind of wonder, and I wonder if it's the fault of, us breeders for wanting to put, a lot of that stuff out on social media and portraying that. But I mean, and I think that's why Patreon is a thing too, right? Because then you can cultivate your own groups rather than, the old YouTube ways where everyone saw.
Yeah, I did appreciate the move. Oh, now we got some echo from your stuff. I do appreciate the move. That we watched with Brian Barczyk and his videos from, the rows and rows of rack systems and getting each other bit by different snakes, moving towards kind of the reptarian days when you have, big cages and a retic in a giant room size cage. I really like that move. And, I think it was a nice evolution. Now, the reason he could do that was because of his YouTube presence and, the clicks he was getting there.
Yeah.
So,
yep.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's so many aspects of this hobby, and I think this was a really great discussion. Unfortunately, we've lost Dave, and we're kind of going on an hour and a half now, which is a little bit longer than we typically go. But I think there's just such a rich field, and maybe we'll have to have you guys back on to discuss this further. But yeah, just a really fertile ground for discussion for sure. But I mean, if you've got kind of a summary or a consensus, of what, to kind of summarize your argument, we'll kind of have last statements, and then we'll
okay. Well, I feel like I have to, after challenging a lot of this stuff or saying, making it sound like a negative Nancy, I don't dislike ball pythons. I have a lot of ball pythons, and I don't think the market's, obviously dying or going to go away. I think we have to worry more about legislation and all that more so than just, than anything. But other than that, market's always seen stuff like this. I think we will get hit harder because the market blew up so much. So I'm sure it'll, it's going to hit a little harder than it has before, since we've had so many people breeding now, at least with like ball pythons and stuff, but aside from that, because I feel like I have to emphasize this, because if you don't, people just assume you hate ball pythons. And I always tell Nick, I go, you know why you always had trouble selling ball pythons? Because you talk shit on ball pythons all the time. But I have to clarify that. It's not that I think the world is ending and ball pythons won't have a presence. I will admit, all the species of python I keep, ball pythons still, they're really hard to beat. And I'm not just talking about Morris. I'm talking about just personality wise, they're just, and I didn't mean to just attack ball pythons in this, but they're just such a big part of the market. I felt like they were just the obvious choice to, in general talk about, but it's like I said, it's not that just like ball pythons or anything like that. I think there's multiple reasons why they make such a good pet, rather than just the colors and, stuff. So.
Well said. Dave, you want to kind of summarize the pro?
Well, I think it's always been the hobby to rag on ball pythons.
Yeah. That's the technical issues are always a challenge, especially when we have 4 of us on at a time. But
well, I would have rather have had Dave talk about the podcast, because I know very little, and I'm always skeptical till we get a couple episodes in, because like I said, he chose 3 people. I'm not familiar with Ryan though. He has another guy. I told him we need to do a like an introduction podcast so we can get to know each other, because we all have weird, different sense of humor, and just get to know each other so we don't rub each other the wrong way. Because, I've listened to plenty of podcasts where it's just the host, even Eric and Owen, their humor was different at first, but then they kind of settled in and they got into the groove of thing.
Yeah.
I kind of was like, well, maybe we need to at least get to know each other, because I know Junior, but I don't talk to Junior that often. So it's not like or that friendly with each other or anything. But yeah, it's, oh my God, I don't even know. Damn it, Dave, he had to be gone. I'm trying to think of the name. Was it the nope, drawing a blank. Can't think of its name. But it's just a podcast with me, Dave, Junior from JMG, and then another fellow named Ryan. And it's just going to be the four of us. We're not going to all be on at the same time, but it'll be like interchanging, between. I'm sure Dave will be on most of them now. He's a pretty interesting guy who has some, good insight on just reptile stuff in general.
Yeah, it's called All for One Reptile Podcast.
There we go. That's sad. Didn't even remember what it was.
No
but yeah, no, I just it's hopefully we can get nerdy like NPR. I'd like to have both of you guys on, Rob and Justin, because we got some interesting topics we'd like to talk to just about, just all kinds of things, Eric and Owen. I've been telling them we need to get them on because they're the, shit. If anyone can tell you how to pioneers and just people who can, tell you how you can deal with or handle the longevity aspect of podcasting, most people, they do it for a solid year or two and then they're 3 even, and then they disappear and
falls apart,
because so like, how did they, I don't know. I think there's a bunch of cool stuff we could talk to them about, along with you guys, because,
Yeah. I don't know. I think, I mean, I really, we were talking about this before we started the podcast, but, Dave had a podcast before, and the names, of course, failing me. I'm terrible with names, just like you are.
Herpetoculture Rock.
Yeah, Herpetoculture Rock. Yeah,
I can remember that one, but I can't remember the one you actually wants me on. Oh God, I already failed.
Yeah, but they did a great job with that one. I really enjoyed it, and I mean, Dave is just a great character. He's just got some. He thinks in a really cool way, and so I think it's going to be really a successful podcast. That longevity is the.
He's a very open-minded guy. I think that's what makes him, and he just asks interesting questions. He's always curious, willing to learn. So I think that's why it'll be good to have him on it, because I always blow him and tell him, like, I was like, man, you could really do some damage in the podcasting world if you decide to do it, but we'll see how it goes, because it's failed tonight. So I don't, I'm a little nervous that this may not work, unless he's willing to go back to the Walmart parking lot.
The parking lot.
With that he was doing with the other ones. So,
that's the challenge, is those technical issues really can bog you down. I mean, Nick's a great example of that, where he announced his podcast and recorded a bunch of issues, but they had technical issues and he wasn't pleased with it. So we haven't seen an episode yet, so it's like,
what a slacker.
Cause I'd love to hear, I mean, I've heard some of the guests that they've had and I really want to hear those interviews, but
for sure. Oh, without a doubt.
I don't know that they're going to be released or not. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So hopefully you guys overcome the technical hurdles and get that going. And, I think maybe for hosts could be a benefit, because if somebody's not available, you got 2 others to choose from. There's always going to be 2 of you that can get on there and do it, or one,
Well, it's just, and then we all keep such a wide range of species too. So all of us can target different things. Cause I mean, there's only so much I'll be able to talk to with someone who's really into lizards or something like that, or, or whatever species it is, tortoises, turtles,
you can always tell when somebody's out of their depth, when they're getting into a species group that they're not familiar with and they're asking very, inane questions. You're like, oh man, this is going to be a little rough, but
right.
Yeah. So that's good to have a wealth of expertise, a broad expertise, cross group.
Like with Rob, we'd like to have Rob on. And I think with Rob, I probably wouldn't even be a part of it, because he keeps species I'm just not that familiar with. We'll probably have to have, anyone other than me on with it,
Rob is a wealth of information. I mean, you heard it here. He knows a lot about the industry and a lot about a wide
industry and just herping. I like hearing your guys' herping stories. You guys always have.
There needs to be more herping podcasts.
Yeah. Dave. Well, we all like. For us, we like. I mean, it wouldn't just solely be herping, but we like talking herp. Because like Dave and them don't travel, but he travels around the United States, but he sees a lot of cool stuff,
he was out here for a reptile show and he was asking me for places to go herp while he was in town, so he's looking for opportunities there. Unfortunately I didn't get out with him, but one of these days we'll have to make that happen when he's out for a show. If the weather.
I've been getting so many pictures of like Utah and your guys' national parks and stuff, and I'm like, good God, it looks beautiful.
Oh, it's a great state. There's a reason I live here.
Well, I can tell.
Yeah, keep an eye out for All for One Reptile podcast, and hopefully we'll see some episodes from you guys soon. Yeah, thanks for coming on tonight. It's been a really fun discussion for sure. So, anything else you want to throw out there, promote for yourself?
Just TJW Exotics. I mean, you could follow me, but I'm not updating a whole lot because I've been really busy with this building. So I haven't social media has been the last thing on my mind. And honestly, it just feels nice and I have to deal with social media. I hear people wanting to make it into like a job, and it's just like, man, I just don't like it. Not like that anyway. So
I'm with you on that. Yeah. I mainly just post pictures from herping trips, if I can remember to do it, but
And cool. Like I said, I think it has something to, with your longevity, I knew to go to you for Antaresia. You have a name and a species, or you're known for a species. So I know to go to you. Same thing with Rob. If I was to get, certain Asian rats and, some of the West Indies boas or something, I would know to go to at least talk to them, so there's something to be said too about, if you're truly into a species, you will be known for that species, and then people will reach out to you. Like I'm not saying I'm not nowhere near on your guys' level. I've probably been in it half the time you guys have been in it, but like even, I still get messages and stuff. So it's some of these newer people have to be on social media every day. Sometimes multiple times a day just to build a name for themselves or something like that. So, I think there's something to be said for longevity in this hobby too, if you want to, make it into
that's another thing that we could have talked a lot about tonight is, when you're getting into the hobby, sometimes those flash in the pan, it works out okay. And you can, build and grow really fast, but sometimes that slow grow, so you build a clientele, you build, people who recognize you, and you are known for a certain group of species, and then you can kind of branch out and expand and stuff. But
like Eric with Morelia Python Radio, I think he did, it was a fantastic idea, I wouldn't want to tell Nick this to his face, but I mean, dude, Eric's right up there with him as far as people, when you think of Morelia, I'm not saying that, Eric's writing a book status on carpet pythons, but I'm saying when you think of Morelia, carpet pythons in general, I think of Nick and Eric, because Eric's been doing the podcast for so long now, and you just associate him with carpet pythons, and he's out there and you hear him. Nick's kind of, unless you've talked to him on the phone or you get on the internet, you don't have, you're not used to just creeping on them from afar, because we reptile people aren't very social. So sometimes we like to lurk before we start chit chatting with people, but
well, thanks for coming on. I don't know if Dave can hear us or if he can chime in here or not, but,
no, I'm here.
Okay. Yeah. Do you want to throw out any information?
God damn it,
Dave. Shit again.
Challenge.
This is pretty funny. I mean, this takes us back a decade. This is pretty good.
Right. Yep. I guess there is a price to be paid for living out, where you have a lot of land and a big facility,
Dave, this is making me nervous. If we get stuck with someone that I'm not that familiar with, I'm going to kill you. I might have to go. Me and him don't even live that far from each other. I will drive to his place. And we can both go to the Walmart parking lot together.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, if you don't know Dave Levinson, check him out on Facebook or the other social media. And I mean, he's got some really fun posts and some crazy antics and is really entertaining. So, even if you're not that into reptiles, you can still, watch his stuff and be entertained for sure. His, 4th of July posts are especially entertaining.
Oh yeah.
Although you usually see his, crack here and there, but really, just a fun guy. And, if you see him at a reptile show, go chat with him. He's very knowledgeable and just like we said before, he's just interesting and curious.
Interesting's right. That's a nice way of putting it. and
he is very connected. Like he knows a lot of people and so check him out.
Custom Scales, by the way, that's his company name. Just throwing it out there for him. Yeah. Custom Scales.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
All right. Well, thanks for being on, and we'll hopefully have you back again, down the road, but this has been a lot of fun, and thanks for coming. All right. Well, thanks to NPR Radio for being the umbrella over our podcast here and letting Reptile Fight Club be on their network. And we appreciate Eric and Owen and all they do. And thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you again next week for Reptile Fight Club.